Is Tommy Robinson really a friend of women? I'm not really sure. I don't think so. Is Tommy Robinson really a friend of the Jews? I think the jury's out on that too. Is Tommy Robinson somebody who is self-promoting, probably ultimately for his own gain? And I mean financial, fame and otherwise, very probably.
The idea that he's doing this for fame and fortune, Alex, he is currently locked up in solitary and, by the way, will almost certainly have to declare himself bankrupt again, I am told. Breaking right now, growing outrage over the MSM smears over Tommy Robinson, specifically in regards to the man being a sexist, a racist, and unbelievably an anti-Semite. Now, I'm going to come in just a moment to Camilla Tominey's really shoddy investigation for the Daily Telegraph and their struggling podcast, The Daily Tea. She has been on a long campaign, I don't believe, to present the truth about Tommy Robinson. She obviously went on this morning and derided him and, in her own words, was defamatory about him. But GB News did decide to cover Tommy Robinson only after he lost his High Court battle last week. I was in court. I looked to see if anyone from GB News was there. Absolutely not. But after he lost, they did feel they could cover the case. But unfortunately, what they did was allow a mad lefty to yet again spout defamatory nonsense about the man. Watch.
Look, frankly, I don't care where he ends up. As long as he serves his sentence, it doesn't bother me which prison he's in. He should be treated the same as any other prisoner. And as you say, it's not a serious crime, but it is a crime, and it's a crime that he willfully committed. We've been talking about racist thugs. Tommy Robinson is another one of those.
That's not why he's in prison.
I was just about to say, I accept that that is not why he's in prison, but it is nonetheless true.
Yeah, why is he racist?
He has made. I mean, I don't even. I'm not even. No, I'm not going to justify your question.
Well, come on,
because he doesn't have an
he is a racist.
He and his supporters would deny that vehemently. He's got, as far as I'm aware, again, I'm not a massive Tommy fan or anything. I don't really know much about him. But when you come on a TV channel and say this man is racist, you need to give an example of to what
he has made. All sorts of multiple. I'm not, like I said, I'm not making any comment on his supporters, by the way, because you can support Tommy Robinson and not be a racist. Tommy Robinson is on the record making all sorts of overtly racist statements. He is a racist.
Now, Paul Thorpe posted after that exchange, this absolute melt goes on GB News and tells the nation that Tommy Robinson is a vile racist thug. Quote, when asked to back up his statement, he says he's not going to justify the question. In other words, he's talking absolute bollocks and he knows it. I don't know who this fool is. I've never seen nor heard of him, but the challenge is the same. Come onto my show and back up your claim. Now, Alex Phillips, I actually have no idea who that guy is either. Basically, we both know there's like a conveyor belt of loony lefties who GB News has to put on air to please the off-communists. You know, there's others like Benjamin Butterworth and, you know, all Stella the Greek, all of those types of people. But what I found fascinating in that exchange, Alex, were two moments. The first, when quite clearly that lefty had absolutely no evidence to prove that Tommy Robinson is racist, because there's nothing they can point to. There's no line, there's no quote, it doesn't exist. But then secondly, the presenter on GB News, Ben Leo, feeling that he had to say, oh, well, I'm not a fan of Tommy Robinson, and then admitting that he had done no research into Tommy Robinson, that he hadn't looked into him. And it's almost like, I would argue, willful blindness that is in the mainstream media, because they don't want to know about Tommy Robinson because they know their bosses don't want them talking about Tommy Robinson.
It's willful blindness in the mainstream media, but also, Dan, I'm afraid it's willful blindness in the human psyche as well. It's the way that humans beings are, we are herd animals socially. We don't want to be radically outside of the pack. We sort of feel our way around what we think is acceptable, what we think the majority are going to believe in before we say something or expose something. It's why actually, look, going on a bit of a sort of radical psychological philosophical tangent, but it's why actually bot farms and algorithms are very effective on pushing public opinion, because if people think enough people feel a certain way, they go along with it. Whereas if they think they're out on the limb and they're the only one, they don't trust their own instincts. And so, but it's sort of like, the idea, the way Tommy Robinson's spoken about is now so baked into core public belief. Like when people would say, we've got a problem with the NHS, but that's not a criticism of the hardworking doctors and nurses. People always have to say the hardworking doctors and nurses before slagging off the NHS. Our NHS, as it's now supposed to be called. This is sort of part of the way that human beings work. We're pack animals. And actually, when you look at mass hysteria or mass belief systems, it tends to affect women even more than men, or people with an effeminate mindset rather than a masculine mindset. And I'm not, critiquing that rando. I don't know who he is, but he didn't really strike me as I lift weights and I've got, huge amounts of testosterone coursing around my body. It's a very sort of feminine mindset to want to fit in and to want to not be courageous and stand out like a sore thumb and have true sort of belief in your convictions and risk being unpopular. And that is what the Tommy Robinson, now when it comes to people in the media, that is what the Tommy Robinson effect is. But what you're noticing as well is the more people are turning around and sticking their head above the parapet and going, do you know what, I've spoken to the man, or I went back and I looked at footage and I, for myself, tried to see the things he said that is why he's called a racist or why he's called a thug. And I couldn't find anything. The more people who do that and start to say that, and the more that creates a head of steam, the more you'll start to find these people fall, and they'll start turning around going, I always liked Tommy Robinson. I always thought he was okay. This is more to do with, I say, human psychology than anything else. But it's sad, it's sad that our media works in a way that we don't have alpha characters. We don't have people who are proper researchers and data gatherers and have independent convictions, that we do have a lot of herd instinct, wet, feminine types dominating the media discourse, and people who don't have courage of conviction.
Indeed. And on that note, Camilla Tominey conducted this investigation for the Daily T podcast on the Daily Telegraph. Now, I watched the whole thing because I wanted to be fair to her, and I hoped that she would open her mind a little bit after she had been on this morning and made defamatory claims about Tommy Robinson. What was so fascinating, Alex, is on this journey, she also found no evidence of Tommy being racist or anti-Semitic. So I thought, okay, this is going to be interesting because she hasn't found any evidence of this. She's relying on a gut feeling, which has come from the coverage of this man in the mainstream media. And Camilla Tominey believes the mainstream media so much because she's part of it and it's her future and the mainstream media is everything. So she just thinks, well, there's no way that the mainstream media narrative about this guy can be wrong. Now, as I say, I watched the full investigation. She found no evidence that Tommy Robinson was racist. She went and spoke to people who'd known him for a long time, people who'd previously worked with him. Fundamentally, she interviewed critics of him, but she still didn't find any evidence. However, I want to watch with you, Alex, her conclusions to this investigation, because despite finding no evidence, she still just decided to go with her gut feeling. Watch. But first, don't eat breakfast until you learn about caloric bypass. Your breakfast is setting you up for the entire day to either gain weight or lose it. The term breakfast literally means to break your fast that you started the night before. About 4 hours after you eat dinner, your body switches from the nutrients we get from food to the stored glycogen we have in our bodies. Once glycogen stores are depleted, typically after 8 to 12 hours of fasting, the body shifts to burning fat for energy. Fatty acids are released from fat stores where they are converted into ketone bodies through a process called ketogenesis. Then, when you eat breakfast in the morning, the body starts the cycle again. This is where the caloric bypass comes into play. Dr. Gundry, a heart surgeon in California, learned that if you break your nightly fast with something called MCTs or medium chain triglycerides, you can actually keep burning fat throughout the day and use it for energy. But there are specific types of food that contain these MCTs. Using this breakfast breakthrough, he was able to lose 70 pounds just through diet, and he did this in his 60s. You can find out all about it and his exact method by going to thehealthyfat.com/outspoken. That's thehealthyfat.com/outspoken, or click on the link in the description box below. It is important to remember that everyone's body processes fat differently, and it all depends on your unique metabolic type, which is why in the video he released for my amazing viewers, he talks all about it. It really is quite fascinating, and it actually might change the way you think about your health. So go to thehealthyfat.com/outspoken, or click on the link in the description box below. But now, back to the show.
I think it also behoves journalists to have a look at the claims that he is a political prisoner, that he is being treated differently because of how outspoken he has been about the Pakistani rape gangs and other issues. I've had constant to's and fro's with people about Tommy Robinson. I've described him on television and in pieces that I've written in very derogatory and disparaging terms, because from my perspective, and I think this was reflected in the interview with Lucy Brown, I've always wondered to myself whether Tommy Robinson would have taken such an interest in the rape gangs if the perpetrators weren't Pakistani. That point she makes about his now support for Andrew Tate doesn't really sit well with him proclaiming to be this sort of self-styled champion of working class women. I've similar suspicions about his support for Israel, because you could also argue that would he be supporting Israel so vociferously if Israel's opponents weren't Muslims? And that's where the problem lies. You know, is Tommy Robinson really a friend of women? I'm not really sure. I don't think so. Is Tommy Robinson really a friend of the Jews? I think the jury's out on that too. Is Tommy Robinson somebody who is self-promoting, probably ultimately for his own gain? And I mean financial, fame and otherwise, very probably. So while as a journalist I will always argue that the freedom of speech case should be heard, and actually the one thing I have changed my mind on when it comes to Tommy Robinson, I had previously argued, in fact I had this debate with Jordan Peterson himself last summer, I questioned the wisdom of him interviewing Tommy Robinson, and I discussed that in this studio with Kamal and Piers Morgan. And Piers Morgan made the very valid point that Elon Musk can just platform Tommy Robinson without questioning at all what he stands for.
I mean, Alex, the first thing, well, look, I'm interested in your whole response, but I would just say very, very quickly, the idea that he's doing this for fame and fortune, Alex, he is currently locked up in solitary, and by the way, will almost certainly have to declare himself bankrupt again, I am told. So there's no fortune, and his fame is coming at a great cost. But do you see what I mean? That really, even in her conclusions, it was still just based on a gut feeling. I don't think he likes women. I don't think he likes the Jews. But zero evidence produced.
Let's unpack. I haven't seen the documentary, by the way. I've just seen that clip you've played there. So I just want to unpack what she has said, because some of it is true, okay? So in terms of, look, we know that the reason Tommy, so let's go back to the first point about the fame and fortune. He started campaigning against the what was happening in Luton where he grew up, because he saw it firsthand. He had a cousin who was groomed. He saw these gangs of extremists handing out leaflets, spitting on soldiers and memorial services to soldiers, and he tried to set up a petition first of all and then said enough is enough. So he firsthand experienced the malign activities of extremist Muslim gangs in Luton, and that's what he stood up against. as a result of doing that before his time, if you will, and being successful at doing that, and actually getting a lot of attention and people listening to him and therefore getting attacked, he kind of has no choice. He can't go back into a normal life now. Can you imagine him coming out of prison and going, oh, do you know what? I'm just going to be a painter decorator. It's gone now. He's got to do this, right? Society has forced him into a position where he's got to be Tommy Robinson and not Stephen Yaxley Lennon. He cannot go back now. Society's not going to let him. So first of all, that is what I would say. We know that this came about from a heartfelt, organic, circumstantial conviction that he saw what was going on. And he wanted to go out and fight this problem. And the problem in Luton was with Islamism. Okay, so that's true. Now, what Camilla then says is, but is he standing up for working class women and other topics, or is he just doing it because it's Muslims? Well, no, he's fighting Islamism. He's not wearing a T-shirt saying, I'm a feminist. He's not pretending to. I don't know why we're even having a trial of Tommy Robinson about whether he is working on behalf of working class women. He's not. He's campaigning against Islamism. That's what he's always been doing. He's not even tried to tell us, I care about women so much so that I want to also ban pornography. I also want to make sure that, X, Y, and Z. He's never even said he's doing that. So I don't even understand why that is like being picked over. And then when it comes to the whole racism thing, we have this problem in this country that we still attribute culture to race, where we know full well that, there are plenty of black people, brown people, yellow people who are more British than you and me put together, right? Who probably have pictures of the Queen on their wall, afternoon tea, love Britain, sing God Save the Queen louder than anybody else. And then you've got plenty, way too many white, woke, liberal people in metropolises who actually seem to want to associate and augment and laud, Muslim communities or foreign communities more than Britain. They hate Britain. So they're not patriots just because they got white skin and were born and bred here. They hate this country. So this whole idea that now Tommy Robinson is this, talking earlier about, Reform UK, Rupert Lowe, the candidate for Runcorn and whether she went to this refugees welcome thing. We have this desire for everyone to be absolutist all the time. Well, if Tommy Robinson's going to stand up against grooming gangs, he better be a bloody feminist and hate all these other things. If you really support women's safety, you should also fight against. No, he doesn't. He just fights against grooming gangs. Let him get on with that. It's the same way as did Sarah, what do I say? I can't remember her name, Sarah Pochin, the candidate for Runcorn, wants us there, go to refugees welcome. Or maybe she did 3 years ago. I don't care, as long as she didn't want to go and, stand on the cliffs of Dover and clap them in now. Absolutism, letting perfection be the enemy of good is such a problem we seem to have. So I don't even understand why we're making Tommy Robinson stand trial for all these other things. He is here to fight against the more pernicious and dangerous elements of Islam. That's it. That's got nothing to do with what skin colour you have. One of the biggest Islamic terrorists in Kenya, who did the bombing of the Westgate Centre, the big shopping centre, was white. She was British born. It was a woman. She's known as the White Widow. It doesn't, all these other stupid things, the identity politics, we wrap everything up in today. It's just ridiculous and static and vacuous. It's got no purpose. So in response to all of that, no, I don't. If Tommy Robinson also thinks Andrew Tate's okay, fine. I completely disagree with him on that. I think Andrew Tate's grim. But does he think there's a problem with grooming gangs? Yes, he does. Do I agree with that? Yes, I do. I mean, he doesn't have to sort of see the world entirely the way I see it. No one does.
Thank you so much for watching Dan Wootton Outspoken. Please click on my face just to the bottom left to subscribe to this brand new independent news source and turn on the notification bell so you'll be alerted to our brand new live shows, uncancelled interviews, and special royal episodes. Outspoken is also now available as a podcast, so you can listen to the show every weekday on the go, wherever you are.